Hello, all of you caricature enthusiasts. We're going to talk about the eyes, and this might be one of the most important videos that I'm going to make for training. I've gone through all of this information hundreds of times, training new people for the job here in Myrtle Beach. We've had artists who have been trained by me and are still doing caricatures, and 10, 15 years later in different countries around the world. It is the greatest job in the world, in my opinion. It's almost something that you would do for free, but you get paid well for it. So anyway, it is a great job. We're going to start talking about the eyes, eye anatomy, and all of that. And the reason we start out with the eyes, it's really kind of a centrally located feature on the head. And really, for the average adult, it is, it's like halfway down the head. Okay, a lot of people tend to draw the eyes as if, you know, there's less anatomy at the top of the skull. So really only do this if you're stretching somebody, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger type or a football player or something. I wouldn't do this to any ladies, and definitely not to any kids, okay? So for the average adult, keep these eyes midway on the head. For kids and babies, you can put the eyes lower on the head, okay, and make the eyes bigger. Kids and babies get a bigger cranium, maybe 2/3. Up there would be cranium, and 1/3 for the rest of the face. But you can start your drawing with the eyes, and the reason we do that is because every feature that you draw after that, you can constantly be comparing them to the eyes, and you don't have so much space, you know, to navigate through. So let's see. Remember that the eye is a ball shape. And we do have a sequence that we use for drawing, a step-by-step sequence, which we literally break the whole caricature down into line by line. So this first line you draw, you got to look at your model and kind of figure out where that line is going to be. The bottom of the top eyelid, or the top of the opening of the eye. That's usually the first line we make. And you can, once you get used to the sequence, you can mix it up. You can start with the nose if you want to, but anyway, I think this is just real helpful for new artists to kind of have a structure to use, sort of like training wheels for your bicycle or something. Once you get used to it, then you can, you know, experiment and, you know, be creative. And well, you're always supposed to be creative with it, but anyway, this will help you out a lot. So this would be the first line. That would be the second line if you're right-handed. It would be reverse if you're left-handed. Top of the eyelid. Now we're going to have a little bit of the beginnings of a brow shape here and the eyebrow. So try to make the eyebrows look like hair. We'll get into that in a little bit. Anyway, we have a brow shape here starting to happen. Now you can leave off and finish the eyes at the end of your picture if you want to, or just go ahead and do them all. Remember that when you get the model to smile for you, that their cheek is going to be pushing up against the bottom of the eye there and making more of a squint. Okay, so the more a person smiles, the more you're going to get a squinting of the eyes. All right, let me just go ahead and do that. So you got this little bit of a push, an upward push there with the cheeks. Let's see, what are we going to talk about here? Okay, so we have a ball shape. This would be the first line. So let's talk about what makes this line. Remember that behind all of this is a ball shape. And all these lines on a ball shape are kind of curving away from the middle, okay? Like the lines on a basketball. So the more toward the middle the line is, the straighter it's going to be, okay? And the more you move up or down, the more it's going to be a curve. Now this is useful to you because depending on how a person's looking at you while you're drawing them, they may have a straight line there and something like that. That kind of look. All right. So I think more often, most of the time when you draw the eye, the top of the eyelid there is going to be a little straighter than the bottom on average. Okay, so that means you're going to be seeing more of this iris and pupil on the underside there. Okay, now this eyelid, well, there's going to be a curve on this eyeball, so think of it as a thick layer of flesh. It's got a little thickness, and it might cast a little shadow onto your eyeball there. In fact, it usually does, almost always. So this first line you make is going to be a pretty thick and dark line, okay? For one reason, it's a thick layer of flesh there, and also you have your eyelashes coming off of this thing. So on the job, you'll be able to vary the weight of your lines. So every line, you should be thinking about the weight of the line. If you draw the whole caricature where every little bit of it has the same line weight, it's going to look like a coloring book or something like that. So it's useful to have a variety of line weights in everything that you draw, according to whether it's on a shadow side, like the bottom lip, or the top lip is going to be on the shadow side. The bottom of the bottom lip is going to be thick with shadow, and the other lines, there might be a thicker right there, a little bit thicker right there. So anywhere there's likely to be a shadow, you can thicken that line and get more of a three-dimensional sense going on in your drawing. It's just more interesting to look at, to have a variety of line weights. That's why we use this marker. We can get really fat lines and then really thin lines with this Crayola marker. All right, let's talk about, let's see, we have this brow shape here. All right. This shape right here, I want you to think about this as being one shape, okay? And it can help you to place your eyebrows. This curve right here will help you to place your eyebrows in such a way that it'll feel like it's in the third dimension and not just lines sitting on a flat piece of paper. So when you draw the eye, think about this curve at the outside of this eye, this lid, and this, all of that, and the eyelashes also. They'll kind of make a curve going around this brow shape. Okay, and so while you're doing your eyes, you can extend that, at least mentally. Maybe you don't see it on everybody, okay? But you should be thinking about it. Now, if you look at the magazines, the beautiful ladies in the magazines, you will see just a tiny little bit of shadow right out there. So in your imagination, you can kind of imagine that this curve is continuing onto your eyebrow. And you can make this curve, you know, close to the eyelid or even touching the eyelid sometimes, okay? But if you do them touching, it's going to look more angry, all right? If you raise them up like this, you're going to get more of this optimistic or surprised look. And Norman Rockwell used to do that all the time when he would take photos of his models. He would tell his models to raise up their eyebrows as much as they possibly could, okay, to get that happy or optimistic look. So that's another piece of information that you can use in your caricature to tweak it to make it look happier, okay? When you get done with your caricature, you want this thing to look happy and amusing, and then the customer is going to be happy when they see it. But if you if you do your caricature and you can't get a smile and their eyes look angry or dead or something, there's a chance they may not like it. So that affects your income. They may not choose to pay you for your work. So that's only rare, though. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, now let's talk about this eyeball again. So the lids are going to follow these curves, like on this eyeball here. Now, this colored part, we call that the iris. And the black part is the pupil. Now there's probably going to be shadow underneath this lid. So when you place your highlight, you've got to be mindful of where the shadow might be happening under here. And I tend to put the highlight either top left or top right on my eye, okay? That's because usually the sun or the electric light is going to be higher, so it's usually going to be high on the eye. And you can switch it to either side if you want. I would not put it in the middle of the pupil ever, okay? And I like to, in recent years, I like to put a little bit of dark around this pupil, make it look a little bit brighter. You want it to look as bright as you possibly can. I'll even put a little gray around it, like that. But opposite the highlight, you're going to have a lighter area of the eye there. All right. Now, there's a reason for that. We might as well just talk about it right now. Okay, so the eye is mostly a ball shape. Now, where the iris and pupil are, you kind of have a bump there. Okay, so it's like a ball shape, but it's got a little bump on it like a glass dome. And then inside here where the pupil is, it's more like a It's more like a bowl shape. Okay. So, the light, when it's shining, will come down and it'll hit the outside of this dome. Okay, and that'll make your highlight. And then it'll shine through to the opposite side of your iris there. Okay, so you might have a darker area right here and then a lighter area here opposite of your highlight. Okay. All right. Now these things, you don't have to do these little lines in here. I kind of skip that. You know, you can just pick and choose what you want to do. I just tend not to draw these, okay? Probably, you know, just a lot of it becomes habit after a while. So you might just decide you don't like these things. Now the highlight, I usually make it a circle, but you could also make it a square if you want to, and that could actually make it look sharper, which is what we want. Okay, we do not want that highlight to look blurry or fuzzy. Remember, it's on like a piece of glass. Okay, it's wet. Okay, so it's going to be sharp. Okay, and it's going to be bright. And this would be probably the main area of contrast in your drawing, or one of them. Probably be the focal point in your drawing. Okay. And with it being midway on the head, midway on your caricature, that'll probably get more attention than anything else in your drawing. So it's worth it to spend a little extra time working on eyes, and I would recommend looking at the beautiful girls in the Vogue magazines and stuff like that, and copying their eyes. And what we wind up doing usually is we stylize a lot about the eyes. Okay, we tend to make these pupils a little bigger. You don't have to. In certain cases, you might have somebody with very bright eyes, and in that case you might want to draw them with a smaller pupil to kind of emphasize that brightness that they have. Okay, which you can do, but the problem with that is that sometimes a small pupil will give this look of disinterest in the eyes. So we kind of like want to make them bigger a little bit, and that kind of makes the person look like they're more interested, or they're happy to see you. All right. But if you do like a small pupil, sometimes it'll look like a negative emotion, which we do not want. You can do it for people with very bright eyes if you want to emphasize the brightness of their eyes. Okay. All right, now we talked about all that. Okay, this whole iris and pupil area here, okay? The size of it is going to influence the effect of your drawing. Okay, now we know that babies have most of their space taken up, most of their eye space is taken up by iris and pupil. Okay, so if that makes a person look babyish or young, then the opposite would make them look older. Okay. So less iris and pupil area there would add some age, theoretically. All right. So a lot of the things, once you get used to doing babies, a lot of the things that you do for babies, you can do the opposite of, or you can do the same thing for adults. You can give them a babyish look. You can give them a little bit more baby fat in some cases to make them look younger. Bigger eyes is always a good thing, especially for ladies and kids. Bigger eyes in general. And then the reverse for men, you can give them smaller eyes. You can make them look more manly, and you can exaggerate more on the men when you do small eyes. Okay, because usually men are going to be able to handle the ridicule or whatever you do to them, but the ladies and the kids always have to look cute. Okay, ladies have to look pretty, babies have to look cute, always. All right. If you're trying to sell your picture, if you're working for a magazine or something, you can probably get away with a lot more of harshness in your drawings. So, babies, bigger iris and pupils. Let's see. Let me see here. What else are we going to talk about? Contrast. Okay, we talked about the brow. Okay, that's one of the main pieces of anatomy here. The eyebrows. Okay. You can, if somebody has particularly hairy eyebrows, you can just make hair like that. Okay? As long as they're following this rhythm of this brow shape like that. Okay? As long as they're following in rhythm. For years, a lot of times I've just given in a little outline for eyebrows and then filled them in with hair. Okay, I do that for a reason. It's because I'm thinking about the whole shape of the eyebrow more than any individual hairs, and I want to get that shape right before I put hairs on it. But in some cases, maybe you're doing somebody that looks like J. Jonah Jameson or something like that. You might want something like that, the really big hairy eyebrows, maybe even a unibrow. So another thing I need to mention is pay close attention to every single model that sits down for you. Notice as much as you can, okay? So when you start off with this first line in your caricature, you should have looked at your model and you should have decided, are their eyes kind of going up in the middle like that? Are they angled upward? Are they angled downward? Like that. You're going to get infinite variations on eyes, okay? The one thing I don't want anybody to do is I don't want you to draw the same eye every single time, every single customer. Some artists do that. You can make a living doing that. But I wouldn't recommend it because you'll bore yourself to death while you're sitting in the chair trying to draw people. You need to pay attention to what people really look like. Try to notice as much as you can, okay? And you really, by the time you get done with your drawing, every single drawing you draw should be unique. It should be nothing like anything you've ever drawn before because everybody's a unique individual. So, the more you pay close attention to your model, the better off you're going to be. They're going to like it too, because that's the reason they pay to get a caricature. They want to see themselves in the drawing. And that's one of the reasons I'm not really a wild and crazy caricature guy, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. But it's just my personality. I try to get as much of the person in there as I possibly can. And I did start off with portraits many years ago before I did caricatures. And so I come from that kind of a background where I'm like, you know, just studying everything as carefully as I can. And I'm afraid that if you start to draw the cartoony type stuff, you might actually get to be too loose and too fast to where you're not paying attention to certain things when you need to be. So anyway, what else can I tell you? Oh, the eyelashes. Let's talk about eyelashes real quick. All right. This is another area where you will stylize over time. Now, if you look at your Vogue magazine or whatever, you will see like a million little eyelash hairs, okay? And you don't need to do that. I recommend simplifying it, okay? These eyelashes, you can do them with one stroke. You can do them with one stroke of your marker. They need to taper and radiate, okay? They need to taper and radiate. They should be a little longer toward the outsides, okay? Shorter on the inside because they're facing toward you. They're facing toward the viewer over here, and they get longer out here. And man, you will see some crazy eyelashes on this job. You will see some giant eyelashes. You can't even exaggerate them. They're so crazy. All right, so taper and radiate. And also simplify, okay? You're probably better off doing your own stylized eyelashes most of the time for ladies than trying to copy millions of tiny little eyelashes. So you're just kind of putting some order. You're putting order on your picture. Another thing is, while you're studying your customer, there'll be some variety and you might have pupils toward the middle, iris and pupils toward the middle, cross-eyed like that, or you might have somebody like this. And I think it's worth it to take an extra minute, not even a minute, it doesn't even take that long. Just stop for one split second while you're drawing the caricature and try to notice if these eyes are cross-eyed like that, or are they moving out like that, okay, or if they're like dead center. Speaking of dead center, I know it may not be easy, but try to get this pupil dead center in this circle, even though you can't see the whole circle. Part of this circle's gone behind the eyelids. Let's shrink that. Try to get this thing dead center. And you can make the highlight square shape if you want to. And I like to shade around it. I'll say it again. It's worth saying. I like to shade around that highlight, and opposite the highlight, I like to keep it light. I like to shade over the eyelid, okay, because you have a change of plane right there. Okay, that's another thing we can talk about. This brow shape, if you look at it from the side, what it is you have two planes. Okay, like that. And the eyeball and eyelids is like a ball shape coming out of two planes that have been kind of put together like that. So the eyebrow is usually going to be on the outermost portion of this bump right here, that angle. It's going to be on the outermost part of that usually. Maybe there's some advantage in having it be there because it kind of, I guess the purpose of the eyebrows is to soak up the sweat to keep it from getting into your eyes. Yes, I'm a believer in design. Okay. Oh, there's another thing I forgot to mention is that the hairs, the eyebrow hairs should be radiating just like those eyelashes. Okay, radiating this way and that way. Okay. Anyway, you have two planes right here and right here, and the eyeball is kind of breaking through in the middle of these two planes. All right. So when you're practicing, I recommend doing pairs of eyes. I like the turned eyes. Okay. The straight on, you can do a million straight ons at this job. You can do all straight on shots if you want to, but when you turn a head, you're really getting a good sense of three-dimensional anatomy. All right, so I recommend turning these heads to an angle when you're practicing as much as possible. All right, I think that's about it. I've probably forgotten some stuff, and I'll have to get back to it. Or anyway, I've remembered as much as I can, but this will be part 1 of our training. And the next one will be noses. Okay, so it's the next step in our sequence would be the nose. So you would start out with the top of the opening of the eye. You could follow with the bottom of the opening and then work your way around until you've got the two eyes and the surrounding structure. Okay, that would be the first part of your sequence. So for practice, right after watching this video, while the information is fresh in your mind, you should grab a magazine, start doing pairs of eyes, at least 20 pairs, and then I should be keeping an eye on you to see what you're doing, and that's it. So happy drawing, everybody.